Visit, we heard that Turkey is willing to contribute more for the development of IKN. Maybe you can elaborate about that?
Actually, now let's go one by one on what areas that Strategic Council had discussions. Of course, the economic relations were on the top of the agenda. Turkey and Indonesia would like to improve the relations and also increase the trade volume. As you have just mentioned in the beginning of the news, Turkey and Indonesia have only $3 billion of trade volume. Given the size of economies of our countries, this is much lower than the targets that our leaders had set. They set a target of $10 billion per year, but now it is only $3 billion. So we have to really work hard in order to increase the trade volume between Turkey and Indonesia. That's why economy was the major discussion between the two leaders. Of course, the investment is one part of this issue. The investment in both countries should be much more so that the trade volume will be increased. When it comes to what Turkey will do in the country, that is the plan, of course, at the moment. Of course, Turkey has some strengths in different fields. One of them is construction industry. Turkish companies are in top 50 in the world, and they are doing a lot of construction projects in many parts of the world. They have top-of-the-range technology, human resources, etc., and very good experience. Now, Indonesia has started, of course, IKN, a new capital in Nusantara. Turkish companies will be very much interested in investing there and also play a role in the construction of a new capital. And also, more importantly maybe, the government of Indonesia set a target of 3 million housing per year. And of course, as I said, the Turkish companies are very famous in building, constructing areas. And some of the companies from Turkey will be interested in also taking part in such projects. This, I think, will highlight the close link between Turkey and Indonesia. So the economic dependency, in a sense, is quite a useful dependency, actually, because that will bring more and more investment to Indonesia and vice versa, probably. And this will create a new momentum of economic links between the members of two G20 countries. I think this is very important because when we look at the economic development of your country, it is admirable because Indonesia grows 5% every year and there is less inflation. I think that shows a great potential for Turkish companies to be present. Already there are some Turkish companies actually operating in Indonesia, but we would like to see more Indonesian companies to invest in Turkey and also Turkish companies investing here. So this is a very important, I think, aspect of our relationship. And of course, there's some other areas like defense industry, health issues, and also educational matters. And you have also shared a very short video when President Erdogan was talking about human-to-human relationships. It's about tourism, for example. It is also a big potential for both countries that we need to address.
Let's sort it one by one. Let's start from the tourism sector first. We know the relationship in tourism is also have a high value. How can we cooperate to make it bigger?
Of course, Turkey has invested in tourism industry in the last 30 years quite a lot. Today, Turkey receives 55 million tourists per year. Istanbul alone receives 20 million tourists. Antalya, another city in Turkey on the Mediterranean coast, receives almost 20-25 million tourists per year. And given the cultural proximity between Turks and Indonesians, and also common values, I believe that we have a big potential in tourism areas. And Indonesia has beautiful places. It is not only Bali. When you talk about Indonesia, many people think of Bali as the first destination to go. Of course, it is a beautiful place, but there are many other places where Turks can come and enjoy their holiday here in your country. And also there are very important cultural sites that you have here. What we need to do is to, I think, promote Indonesia in Turkey, and we should also promote Turkey in Indonesia. How can we do that? Of course, telecommunication is one area. Social media is another area. And also visits by both sides now is already taking place, but we need to increase it. In order to increase it, as President has just mentioned, we need to also increase the number of flights between our countries. Now, there is a direct flight from Turkey to both Bali and Jakarta, but these flights are very limited in numbers. If we increase all those flights, I think it will make an impact on people. It will motivate more people to come together. And also, in order to promote tourism, we would like to see some joint ventures in terms of, for example, making films. Turkish film industry is also growing, especially TV series. Maybe we can ask some Turkish filmmakers to come to Indonesia, shoot some of the films here, so that this will be actually a win-win situation for both countries.
We know because TV series from Turkey is very famous here in Indonesia. And after the visit, we saw 13 agreements or MOUs as a result. So which ones are the priorities?
Well, actually, 13 agreements were signed, but also there were 4 more agreements signed by the private companies. It is not only the private company, the government-to-government agreements, but also some private companies. So when we look at those agreements, we will see that some of them are related to investment, how we can invest more, like Nusantara and housing projects, and also in health industry, because one of the priority, I think, by Indonesia is to improve the health standards of the nation. I think that is what is expected of any government. Turkey has improved in the health sector quite a lot in recent years. And actually, when Mr. Prabowo visited Turkey, he asked specifically about the health system in Turkey and the hospitals that we have built in recent years. And actually, this experience will be shared by Indonesia, and some of the private Turkish companies are now interested in building hospitals in Indonesia. So this was one of the priority areas, because we believe that, I think, the healthy nations, all nations needs to be healthy. Healthy nations can contribute to the development of their countries much, I think, bigger. Second important area was actually defense industry between Turkey and Indonesia. When Mr. Prabowo was Minister of Defense, he used to visit our country, and he used to have a lot of talks and meetings with the defense industry people in Turkey. And he is well aware of the progress that Turkey has made in the defense industry. Over the years, actually, Turkey improved its defense industry and technology to the extent that today, Turkey has 80% self-sufficient on its own resources when it comes to defense of the country. And unfortunately, we see the rise of a lot of threats, both in Asia and in many other parts of the world. And of course, all the nation states should be prepared to defend their own countries. In that regard, Mr. Prabowo, I think, emphasized the importance of improving the defense industry in Indonesia. And Turkey is prepared to share its experience plus its technology. This is a unique partnership between Turkey and Indonesia. Turkey has imported many defense industry material in the past, but we never had any technology transfer by those countries. And now we are in a stage that Turkish companies will be investing here in Indonesia. They will have partnership with Indonesian companies, whether it is private or the state-owned enterprises. And then there will be joint venture production of high-tech defense technology products here in Indonesia. I think this is, especially in the medium and long term, will be very beneficial to Indonesia, because Indonesia will develop its own technology rather than being dependent on only importing from other countries. Why this happened? Because both leaders, I think, believe that, I'll come back to your first question, why Indonesia is important for Turkey. I think both leaders have shared interest because they see that the partnership between Turkey and Indonesia will make both nations more powerful, because on many regional issues and on many global issues, we are on the same page. And of course, if we develop on the economic investment, technology, health, and also there's educational relations as well. I will come to that very shortly. we believe that both nations will be stronger.